So I talked before about, not everybody's plan is to ascend or awaken through a kundalini process because, I mean, even in the Emerald tablets, it talks about how you can't compare one person's journey to another person's. They use different language. It's each flame presents itself differently is kind of what it says. So it would be irrational to assume that my journey is going to look like someone else's journey and so forth. I think it's helpful to hear other people's perspectives and experiences, simply because I know for me it was helpful to at least be validated that there were other people going through a similar process, just because it was so bizarre for me, and I had nothing to compare it to. I didn't struggle with comparing myself to other people specifically because I know I'm different. My daughter, she always jokes with me after I say I'm different. She's like, yeah, I'm not like other girls. Making fun of me. It's her love language, but it's true. I'm not like anybody else. And I think for someone who is wanting to compare directly, that would be very difficult and potentially very damaging or painful. So I don't recommend that. But what I would say is that even though we can embrace the possibility that everybody gets there differently, I would say there is a reverse engineering process that may be helpful in like, I know that the Kundalini rising for me resulted in a series of ways that I managed my life and structured boundaries around my exposure to things, how I dealt with people's energy, how I dealt with individual situations, etc. And so that kind of supported what had already happened. But if you flip that and you were to reverse it, what is that from? Oh, that's from Willy Wonka. Flip it, reverse it. Doesn't he say that when he gets things backwards? I like it when I can access memories in my head properly within any given time. But so if we were to reverse it and instead look for what became of my awakening and put that instead as a framework to bring about awakening, yeah, that is a really, really, really viable plan. And I have quite a few patients who've done that and successfully, and it's taken a bit longer simply because the density of our surroundings is so difficult to combat when there's just a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you can be sailing high, vibing with daily meditations and yoga practice, and you've got great boundaries in your interpersonal relationships and all this stuff, and then suddenly someone shows up from your past, like an ex, or there's a catastrophe, like your water heater explodes, or an illness in your family, and all that just goes out the window. It just goes out the window. Every Zen part of you just gets tossed away, and you're like, it's hard to be here. Which is not to say not being here is a better option, but it's challenging. I'm validating that experience. So having any way that you can create that structure and realign that structure when it's shaken from those difficult moments is fantastic. So that being said, I have mentioned a few things already about what if my cat is about to utilize the bathroom resources in the garden behind me. That's not what I anticipated to happen in this video, but I think that's exactly what's happening. Or she's playing in a hole that I pulled out a dead plant yesterday. Either way. I've already mentioned that limiting access to media in the ways that it reinforces certain programming where our independent thought and our critical thinking is less involved. So that's giving away power, essentially. So the entire ascension process is acknowledging what systems and structures you've given your power away to and trying to take it back. Basically, that's it. I mean, it's taken me 1.5 years to figure out that that's the basis of it. Everything that I've experienced comes back to that fundamental thing. Take your power back. And so that's in so many different facets. What are you doing? No, she's just playing at this point. Thank God. Thank God. It happens in systems with our healthcare. It happens. When I worked in healthcare in the before times, my daughter calls, like before awakening, I worked in healthcare, right? But I was always baffled by how many patients would just like be put on 5 medications and not ask what they did or why. Like, would you like to know what this antidepressant does in your brain? They're like, oh, I guess. Why don't you want to know? So you can make an informed decision. And that's not to say don't take the medications, but it's just giving your trust and power away without investment into like having a say in it, I guess. It's like just giving away your consent without considering. I mean, if you were to know some of those details about this medication that maybe the doctor didn't consider, you may not want to do it. In fact, a good example is like every patient I've had who goes on a medication for their mental health that causes tremendous weight gain. Let's talk about how maybe that can affect your mental health if you gain 30 pounds in a month. It's not actually doing the job for you then. So that's a little rant from a mental health care provider, but I would say it's really important not to give your power away. Always bring it back to yourself. And if that includes media, where if you're part of a large group that believes A, B, and C, don't just assume you believe A, B, and C because you affiliate yourself with that group. Ask yourself questions. Ask what you really believe. And if you don't know, don't claim to know or believe something until you do know for sure. And it doesn't matter what that thing is. I can't express enough. It doesn't matter what that thing is that you believe. It's just important that you believe it and that you didn't get it from somewhere else. So taking your power back, saying yes when you want to say yes, saying no when you want to say no, in all situations. And there's also, but Audrey, I have to pay my bills and I go to a job I don't like, and that's just the way it is. I understand that for sure. But I would also say acknowledging that it's not a place that you intend to stay at forever and ever, amen, but that you are welcoming the opportunity to move to a place that's a better fit, that will also support you and your family. Great intentions to put into the world and to actively start seeking that instead of sitting thinking it will come to you. So there are different ways around it. I've got this cool light stuff happening. It's kind of fun. So the reverse engineering would involve just starting with those little snippets of I'm taking my power back here, I'm taking my power back here. And even I've talked about like I gave like all of the clothes I hated away, or I sold them. That's a huge part of it, is to have everything that is representing you actually represent you. That's huge. And so there's just even a quick little gate it can pass through. If you need a new item of clothing, like say you need sweaters for winter, and you go try on sweaters for winter, if you don't absolutely love it when you try it on, don't buy it. And I mean love it, like you want to live in it, kind of love it. Like you're ecstatic to get dressed in the morning, love it. If it doesn't feel like that, don't buy it. Don't buy it just because, well, I need a sweater and I'm tired, I don't want to go anywhere else. And I get that. I don't enjoy shopping. But then it just sits in your closet and you look at it and kind of resent it for not being the sweater you wish you had. So like maybe prioritize yourself. I think that's really hard among sometimes partners. If you're a very giving person, and I think people use the word self-sacrificing person as a good thing, let's not do that anymore. Also, like we can love other people without sacrificing our will and intention to other beings. You can also be like in a position of internalized power with another person, and it doesn't take anything away from them or you. It's, let's just have our power. Let's do that. And not define love as giving yourself away. But you can be in a relationship and have your voice heard. You can, instead of every time it's time to go out to dinner, your partner is like, let's go get tacos, and you actually hate tacos, which I don't understand what kind of monster would hate tacos, but no judgment. If you don't like tacos and you say okay every time, and you're like angry about it the whole time you're eating the tacos, that is not an honest relationship. It's not giving love, it's giving yourself. So say yes when you want to say yes, say no when you want to say no. Prioritize your pleasure and joy. Like if you're wearing, so I bought this at a vintage store in Salt Lake like a month ago. I love this shirt. It's blueberries. It has blueberries all over it. In fact, I got it because it reminded me of marbles and of polishing marbles, but it's like light. It's not made from actual fabric. I don't think it's made it, but it's old. It's like an old thing, and it feels so good. I love it. And that every person in the world may think it's an absurd shirt for me to wear, and I don't care, you know. So do what makes you feel happy. And on top of that, making sure that you have all your own opinions that belong to you. Now, in addition to that, if we're reverse engineering awakening, I think it's kind of fun to look at what I was discovering, because this is the reverse engineering, is looking at what I was discovering at the time. So I was looking in here because the awakening happened December 13th. And so I'm reading through the next couple of weeks surrounding that, and it's when I gave away all of my clothing. I know, and I went to a jewelry store downtown Boise called the Dragonfly. I've been going to for like 20 years, and I got some new rings. And the reason that was important, it's interesting because I use an oracle deck. I love oracle decks. More than tarot, actually. I like that they're kind of out of that box. They just kind of do what they want. But there's one called it's the Archetypes deck by Kim Krantz, I think is her name. Great artist, wonderful backstory. Got this deck a year ago. Love it. But there are a lot of oracle cards in the deck that show kind of tropes that we experience in our life that to ponder on, let's say. One's called the medallion. And on the medallion, it talks about pay attention to the things that you wear out of habit and how that binds you to ideas, people's, places, things, histories, whatever that you don't really want to invite into your life anymore, which, yeah, sometimes we just wear things out of habit. And so I ended up going to this jewelry store, and I had been wearing things out of habit that I was like, why do I wear this? Why do I wear this? So I ended up buying some new rings, and every time now I buy some kind of jewelry, I have to have a meaning for myself behind it, not just because it's pretty. It's kind of like getting a tattoo you think really long and hard about, instead of getting like a tramp stamp in 1999. I did not get a tramp stamp in 1999, to be clear. I did not, but that was just a for instance. So it was not just clothing, but it was jewelry. And then I was also going through, I mean, music is a very, very, very big part of my life in general, and has sustained me in times of great hardship. Vibrationally, if I'm in a dark space, if I listen to a song I have a relationship with, I immediately get out of that dark space if that song does not take me to a dark space, right? So at the time when my parents were going through their time, I had playlists specifically curated to elevate my frequency. I didn't know that's what it was called, but if you don't know what cymatics is, which is how we can measure the frequency of sound through visual expression, so that can be done, like the vibration of our heart creates this on a machine at the doctor, and we can see what our heart is doing, even though it's a vibration in here, right? And so there's some really cool stuff on YouTube about cymatics, showing the nature of taking a very particular sound next to a kind of fluid or sand or on a plate or something, and it creates these gorgeous shapes that are found in nature. They're geometric and they're perfect, and they each hold a different frequency. And since we are made of mostly water, which can be easily moved and changed with vibration, it does make sense that we do need to pay attention to what kind of music we listen to. And there are times in my life where the music that matched my personal vibration was Marilyn Manson. There were times when I would just listen to Metallica's Black Album, like in the late 90s, after a work shift. I'd be like, super angry. And there are definitely ragey related playlists that I have, like for feminine rage, or if it's just, I'm angry in general. But then there's also, I have a playlist that if I'm down here, it's going to take me up here. And so providing structure, as I'm talking about, another thing would be to make sure that you know what's going into your ears. And I feel like it's so important because I can feel like my energy shift if I go into an alternative store or a bar or something, if I'm kind of forced into a situation to meet with friends and we're like at a bar and I'm like, oh, I don't really like this vibe here. It can be like a vibration and energy, for empaths anyway, where it just shifts everything and it's like sucking the air out of a room, and I can feel it in my chest. And so I would suggest, when you feel that, pay attention to it. You wouldn't put yourself into an actual fire to be burned alive. And this is kind of energetically being put in a fire to be burned alive. Don't subject yourself to it. If you're worried what your friends are going to say, they're going to understand if they know you, is all I can say. Or if they don't, then I hate to be the one who sounds like mom to a first grader. Well, then they're not very good friends anyway, are they? And that's not as easy as it sounds. It's too simplified. It's very hard to stand up to friends and be like, I don't really want to do that. But I do encourage you to at least consider, if you know even the places you're going, consider offering another alternative that maybe feels more comfortable to you. So for me, for my music, I was listening to a lot of things that elevated my frequency, that I felt elevated my frequency. And some of that often has been music that is like EDM or techno. It's always really elevated me. And there are other vocalists that they hit a certain tonality that just feels really yummy to me. And so I would kind of curate those playlists specifically for that. And I would encourage you to do the same thing. I tell my patients to do that. I'm like, what are your favorite artists? And some of them, the teenagers, are like, well, I like death metal from Europe. I'm like, maybe not that one. I mean, go ahead, listen to it. But like, is there something else? You can find a happy medium. Like they'll listen to, I don't know, Freddie Mercury or something. Fabulous. A leaf just fell down in my lap. So, I mean, all of those supportive structures too. And I think these topics are less wooey and more geared toward folks kind of just starting out. And that's great, because not everybody is at a place that's like hyper elevated out of the gate. Not everybody wakes up with an open third eye. People who are seekers that are just simply realizing that life isn't as fulfilling for them as they hoped it would be. This was not what was on the brochure. I am disappointed. My Yelp review is going to be poor. This human experience sucks. There are beautiful things too, which in segue is kind of like disjointed, but I think there was something beautifully intentional about when I get nudged to do things, I typically do them because I've learned that that's just the way you gotta do it. So I was guided one day I'm just certain I'll be able to find this. And by certain, I mean not at all. I should have looked at this ahead of time. Damn it. Is that I was guided to write a list of all the things I love about being a human being. And that is sometimes a really challenging thing. I'm seeing there were a lot of ER visits with my parents. So I may have to bring this up another time just to not waste any more time on this. But I do recall what was basically in there, and I needed it because I was about to go through massive shadow, and there are hardships in this experience of being human that make you wonder why you even are here. And I think going into that, it was important that I actually have a list of the good things. And on that list was, I appreciate like first cups of coffee in the morning. I really do. I appreciate a sunset walk in the summer in the North End in Boise, and specifically the North End in Boise because it has a smell with just like enormous, in my book I call them centurion oaks. They smell so good, and I lived there for a while in my early 20s, and it's just a magical smell. You know how they like grab you and take you to an emotion in a good way. That's what this does. And I love watching sunsets at the top of the foothills, and seeing the sky turn pink and orange. I love the experience of like first kisses. I love the experience of witnessing a butterfly spontaneously. It flits across my path and it feels like a gift. I love the first bite of peach cobbler from harvest season of peaches in Idaho. I really just went on and on and on and on this list. I probably came up with 50 different things about my life personally that were still like attainable, or things that I had experienced that made all of this worth it. And I think that's a really beautiful reminder that we can give ourselves when we're going through the path of digging through our garbage. Digging through the garbage of things. One of my dearest friends, I was over at her place this weekend, and she keeps horses, and she is horse whisperer, and it was a cleaning out of the manure day, and so there was a lot of shoveling of manure, and we were talking about that, and she said it actually is really a wonderful experience because you can focus on the act of it that's purposeful. It puts you into a meditative state. It's doing something good. You can put it into a compost pile. We're talking about shoveling shit. But yeah, I thought after the fact, after I came home, wow, that there's so much metaphor in that. There's so much purpose in shoveling through our own shit, our own darkness, and it feels purposeful, and we can make something grow from it, like compost. So there's really lessons everywhere, and we don't have to overcomplicate it or become hyper fixated on wanting to ascend and having access to every singular dimension and bend time and quantum entanglements, and wormholes and things like that. That is a thing that is part of my everyday, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. Like, that's not what everybody signed up for. Though I am curious where my paperwork is, because I feel like there was a lot of fine print that I would like to discuss with somebody in management. However, that's my info dump for today. Structuring your life to reverse engineer awakening by taking your power back, and also finding the good, and listening to beautiful, yummy music, and wearing things you love. All of that simple stuff we can bring into our everyday to make all of this a little bit better, and in time ascend a bit. So, more later.